Howard on the Republican line in Marietta, California. Thanks for waiting.
Oh, well, thank you. Good morning. Good
Morning.
Congressman.
Good morning.
How you doing? You're spinning them pretty good this morning. Are you there?
We're listening, sir. What's your comment or question?
Okay. Well, I just want to. The last one he's talked about is earmarks, and of course Republicans are, and I'm one of them, would like to see the earmarks stop. And it's not the 1% that you keep talking about, sir. It's not the total, what was it last time, $15 billion. And oh, by the way, this continuing resolution is going to be coming down the pipe from your famous, fabulous leader, who's from California, and I would love to have this lady from Texas adopt her. That would be fine for me, because in fact, as we speak about it, that California, let's see, we passed our budget, it was $19 billion. We just came out with $26 billion more in debt, but that's not the point. The earmarks, the bottom line with earmarks is it is the grease that pushes the sled along.
All right, let's leave it at that point and get a reaction. It's
I'm
a
not
grease
going to
that
react
skids
to
the
it.
wheels.
I'm not going to react to it. I think it's a distraction. The Republicans had a majority, and they so increased earmarks. I mean, it went from like 1,000 earmarks to 10,000. Like, and I don't know the exact numbers, but I mean that was the scope of it in terms of its real increase. Now they're back in charge again. We'll see what happens. I mean, if they're going to end the earmarks, you know, we'll see.
All right, Wendell, California. Glenn, Independent Line. Go ahead.
Good morning, Representative. You are talking now to the most important investor America has, one of them, one of millions. We shouldn't be borrowing money from any other country. And I would like to know just how someone could get away with putting our country in such a big debt and just walk around with a smile on his face as he looked under the table while he was still in office and say, well, there's no weapons of mass destruction here, and he laughed. How can someone like that walk around after putting our country in a hole like this? That's criminal, and he's a criminal. And we are the investors of this country, and no one else should be investing in this country, just Americans.
All right. Glenn, you're referring to former President Bush?
No, that man's a crook. Thank you.
All right. Congressman?
Well, what's true is, and I wouldn't accuse the president of being a criminal, but I would say this, is that when he came in, I was in a hearing, you know, Senator Greenspan was testifying, the head of the Fed, and what we were discussing then as the new administration, the Bush administration was going to be taking office about 10 years ago, was getting the country completely out of debt. There was a projection of $5 trillion in surpluses. And we were talking about paying off the entire debt of the country and what that would do for our economy. And Greenspan was talking about, you know, his view of how central banks around the world would react to that. Well, obviously, 8 years later, what we had was not trillions in surpluses. We had trillions added to the debt. He doubled the national debt in rough numbers. I don't really want to get hung up on the math, but we went from 5 trillion to 10 trillion or so. When the president was sworn in, President Obama was sworn in, we had close to $11 trillion in actual debt. That is debt plus the deficit at the moment he was sworn into office. Now, a lot of people want to blame the president for that, but the truth is, this is what he inherited. Because what Bush did was he did a tax cut. He went through 2 wars. He didn't cut domestic spending at all. He actually increased it. And so the combination of giving away revenue, that is not through the tax cuts, not taking revenue in, spending more, including the cost of the wars, and not doing any cuts, he doubled the debt. Now, Republicans, he's their hero. We understand. But at some point, the math has to add up. It's like what the Republicans are saying now. They're saying, look, we want $4 trillion in permanent tax cuts. But it's $4 trillion over the next 10 years. That is the tax cuts extended. And what they offered in their pledge is about $16 billion in cuts. The math does not add up.
Congressman Fattah represents Pennsylvania's 2nd District, the Philadelphia area, here with us for about 15 more minutes. Bob, in Democratic Line in Indiana. What's the name of your town, Bob?
Terre Haute.
Okay, go ahead. You're on the air, sir.
Yes. My comment is that when President Obama was running for election, that one of the promises he made was that he was going to repeal the Bush tax cut. The top 1% of the people in this country own 26% of the assets, all the private assets in this country. And I think that letting the tax rates go back up to what we had when President Clinton was in office wouldn't be a real hardship on them. Even Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in this country, said that he pays less tax than the secretary that works in his office, proportionally. And so I think that if he thinks that, it'd be all right for him to pay a little bit more tax, I believe that, obviously he sees the real discrimination in this country that possibly, be okay. And that's my only comment. Thank you.
All right, Congressman.
Well, I think, again, you got to be, I agree that we should let the tax cut on the wealthiest 2% expire. I'd like to see us take those revenues and use it for investment in small business development and job creation, like Senator Warner has suggested from Virginia. I really like that idea. The other thing I would say about taxes is that, you'll hear Republicans say, well, some percentage of the public doesn't pay income taxes at all. Well, what they actually do is when they say it, they always slip up. They say they don't pay any taxes at all. And then when you challenge them, they say, well, they don't pay any income taxes at all. And it's interesting to me how they could continually misrepresent the facts. The truth is they pay payroll taxes, which pay is how most people get their income, payroll taxes, and they pay a higher percentage. Most people, 50,000 and under, pay a higher percentage in payroll taxes than people at this upper income pay in income taxes at 250 and above. So first of all, there's nobody in our country that's kind of getting away scot-free. If they have an income, they either paying payroll taxes or income taxes. And that the people, if anyone is not at this point carrying their weight or carrying the weight that they should be carrying, in terms of the challenges that the country faces, it's at this upper income level where people have used a lot of exemptions to avoid the burden of taxation.
Tweet here challenging you on your comments about Republicans and how much they spent when they were in control. And this person tweets in, James Parker, that Democrats had control of Congress as of January 27th. What was the level of spending since then?
Well, what he's referring to is the last few years of the Bush administration. And the Congress spent less in each of those years than President Bush requested in his budget. And that's because Democrats were determined to hold him to a better fiscal standard than his Republican colleagues had in the years prior to. There is a difference in the sense that the Bush administration also, through their tax policies and other policies, brought the country to the brink of financial disaster, and Bush had to ask for a bailout that we call TARP, which cost $700 billion. And so what this caller wants to suggest is that somehow this bailout for the banks should somehow be put on Democrats' back. And it's true that we voted for it. I mean, we had to do it. It was the decision made that was the only way to rescue our economy from a deep depression. But it's because of this hole that President Bush dug us into. So he's trying to be cute with the numbers. I think we should just be fair with each other. And that is to really talk about not who's to blame, even though I'm perfectly prepared, if you want to go through it, to show where, the Republicans did did what they did, and that all the angels are, not on their side on this issue. But I think what's more important is to talk about how we can get our country out of debt. I have the only proposal before the U.S. Congress that would create this country debt-free within 7 years or 10 years or 25 years. There's no other proposal out there that would get us out of debt. That's what I like to see us do. And you don't have to agree with my proposal. I'm trying to generate the notion that we should have a debate about debt and about how to make our country. Why should we go from being the largest creditor nation in the world to being the greatest debtor nation in the world? All of us should be embarrassed by it.
You serve on the Appropriations Committee.
Yes, I do.
Have you had earmarks in the past? Will you continue to try to get earmarks for your district?
I will always represent the interests of my district, and whether that is in seeking to find appropriated funds for the district or programs that can be helpful, I will. But I think that in the House, what they're saying is they're going to ban all earmarks. So there will be no possibility for individual members to seek earmarks under what it seems to be the constraints that they're putting in. But we're not going to have it in the Senate, and I will, be working my friends over there to make sure that the things that I'm interested in will be considered appropriately in the process. If they ban them in the Senate, I'll call the administration and try to make a push for those things that I'm interested in. Members of Congress, there's no legislative body in the country, not a city council, state house, or Congress, where members are not going to push things that they are interested in. And if people believe that's going to happen today, I got a bridge, to nowhere that they should be interested in buying.
All right, staying on the Republican line in Sumter, South Carolina. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I've been listening for many minutes here now, and I think there's been so much misleading commentary coming from our astute congressman here. First thing about tax cuts, like extending. Everybody is at a tax level right now, today. We're paying, whomever they are at a level. And if this is extended, they'll be at the same level.
Right.
There'll be no cutting, but everybody, you all want to say cutting. Cutting has a connotation of reducing the tax. Everybody's going to remain at the same level. There's no tax cutting. And secondly, Congress has the last word in the money's being spent. We always say President, whether it's Obama, Bush, whomever, don't mislead the folks, that Congress has the last word at signing off on any spending bill. And thirdly, here we are with no budget put forward for 2011.
Congressman?
Well, first of all, the gentleman is absolutely correct. That is that what President Bush did in the Republican Congress, they put forth a package of tax cuts. And, the CBO scored them. And in order to avoid the real cost to the budget, they put an expiration date on them. And they expire at the end of this year. So President Bush implemented this. They passed it. They're going to expire. And now the question before the Congress is whether to continue those or not to continue those. He wants to have a semantic argument. I totally agree with him that it really is a question of whether these rates will stay in place or whether they will not stay in place, whether they'll expire as President Bush designed them to expire and as the Congress designed them to expire. Now, they say we need these in order to have job growth. All we have to do is look at the 10 years they've been in place and figure out whether we've had job growth. Or look at the 10 years prior to that under the Clinton rates and see whether we had job growth. You'll see about 23 million jobs more under the Clinton years than you see under these years. Now, but their argument is you have to have these tax rates go forward in order to have economic growth. These are the tax rates that brought us to the point we're at now, which is an anemic job situation. We've lost millions of jobs. We have been on the brink of financial collapse. But this gentleman from Sumter says that the wisest thing we can do is not only go forward doing the same thing, but that we should use words that make it sound more pleasant to the ear.
Let's hear from an independent. Ginger in Augusta, Georgia.
Hello.
Good morning, Ginger. You're on the air.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for taking my call. In reference to the tax cuts, I don't believe it's ever brought up that the upper income people already get a 7.5% tax cut because they do not pay Social Security on the income above that $106,000. That never seems to be mentioned. How come?
Well, I thought that the Debt Commission missed the opportunity when talking about Social Security to suggest that we should have income above the cutoff now calculated in Social Security. But you're absolutely right. For people who earn above a certain amount, they don't have to pay the Social Security tax on that increased earnings. So, I think this is part of a more candid dialogue. Maybe C-SPAN will have a whole day where they'll talk about tax policy and how taxes actually affect Americans in various categories, because I think it would be informative.
The presumptive next speaker of the Appropriations Committee, if he gets a waiver from his caucus, is Representative Jerry Lewis, Republican, and he writes today in the Washington Times key steps to balance budgets. Just a couple of proposals I want to get your reaction to. He says, set multi-year caps on discretionary spending, end the era of massive multi-billion-dollar omnibus spending measures, and end unnecessary emergency spending. Would you agree to those?
Well, I think that, first of all, emergency spending is a challenging situation. If you have a hurricane or if you have a real emergency, you have to deal with it on an emergency basis. But what he's saying is that we shouldn't use items that we know have to be budgeted for and call it emergencies. You know, Democrats have complained about that before when the Republicans put the cost of the census, which is in the Constitution that we have to do it every 10 years, and use it as emergency spending when it should have been budgeted for. So we've all complained about that from time to time, and we have to be mindful of using this emergency gimmick, because once we say it's emergency, it doesn't count towards the budget cap. So there's a big push to do that at times. So I agree with Jerry Lewis on that, and Congressman Lewis on that. And I think that the caps that he's talking about, now the president said president announced a freeze on non-defense discretionary. Republicans have talked about a rollback of those discretionaries. The rollback and then a cap seems to would have cut about 25% or so from the FBI, from education programs, from a whole list of items that I think will be much more problematic. And I think we at some point have to have a more honest discussion with the public about what cuts can be made fairly and where we might need additional revenue. That's the other point the Debt Commission, I think, fell down a little bit, because I think this notion that we should have 2/3 cuts and 1/3 new revenue, I think it should probably be more half new revenue and half cuts. Even though I know it's wonderful and popular to talk about cuts, the truth of the matter is that I'm not sure that there are cuts that can be made at the levels that would be required.
Rod on the Republican line in Glenwood, Iowa. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning.
I am a Republican, but I won't be locked into one idea or the other. I would like to put out an idea, if I might, with our problems in the country of job creation and health care, Medicare, and Medicaid breaking us all. What would it sound like to build like 20 hospitals per state run by the government, and then somebody like me could pay $200 or $300 a month for the services, and I'd be glad to do that. And it would also take care of education if you help the doctors to pay for their education to come work in the public hospitals, and just right on down the line with pharmaceuticals and veterans care. What would you think about an idea like that?
Well, what the president said when he started working on this question of health care, he said, look, as a country, we have to build off of the system we already have. And he said we have an employer-based system in which most people who have health care benefits receive it through their job, and that what we need to do is make it fairer for businesses who provide it. That's why we did a tax credits for over 4 million small businesses so they could better be able to afford to pay for health benefits. And that's why the system that was designed and pushed forward through the Affordable Care Act really is a building block off of the present system. I think that for us to create a system in which there would be public hospitals would not fit well into the context that our country operates in, which is a capitalistic system of free enterprise. We have great hospitals that are run as nonprofits by organizations like the Sister of Mercy, and you have for-profit hospitals, and you have medical schools that are connected to universities who run hospitals to train doctors. I think we have the best health care anywhere in the world. Our biggest problem is access to it by millions who didn't have access, which we believe we solved that problem. And what we now need to do is focus more on cost containment and making sure that it's affordable and that we control the cost better.
Port Richey, Florida. Bob, Independent Line. Thanks for waiting.
Good morning. Thanks for C-SPAN. My interest is, how much does it cost the American taxpayer to keep a congressman in office? And I'd like to have including housing, staff costs, travel, supplies for your offices, committee compensations, your salary, everything that is included to keep you in office for 1 year.
Congressman.
Well, there is no housing provided to members of Congress, and so there is costs for staff. There's a salary. All of this is public information, and if you call my office, we'll be glad to point you to the websites under the control of the Congress that will show you expenditures for any member of Congress you want to see, including mine or your own. The cost of our form of government is, I'm sure, high, but it's the best form of government that is known anywhere in the world. And that's why, as Americans, we've always been prepared to pay the price for a democratic process in which people can elect their own representatives, and you can hold us accountable, and you can vote us in or vote us out.
Congressman Fattah, thank you for talking to our viewers. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.